minutes 30 seconds.
Lascar Corla, my question is specifically around the delivery of social homes. Again, it refers to the delivery report for Q3, and specifically, I know you haven't got final figures for the end of year, but it is to find out the number of social homes delivered, insofar as you can tell us, and also the number of void units restored and reallocated, and then what you intend to do to ensure that next year, that this year now, the following year, is delivering the required number of social homes for people on housing waiting lists.
Minister, it's 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lascar Corla, and thank you, Deputy, for the question. Over the course of Rebuilding Ireland, the Government is committed to meeting the housing needs of over 137,000 households. With funding of over €6 billion in place, significant progress in implementation of the plan has already been made. The latest data available, which is published on my department's website, shows that by the end of September of last year, over 63,700 additional social housing solutions had been provided. 18,781 of these were delivered in the first 9 months of 2018 alone, representing 74% of the target for the year as a whole. This included over 4,500 build, acquisition and leased homes delivered by local authorities and approved housing bodies. And in relation to the voids programme, some 605 voids were funded by my department in the first 3 quarters of last year. The issue of efficient tenanting of social housing is, of course, a matter for each local authority. Data in relation to the fourth quarter of 2018 is currently being compiled and will be published shortly. I'm satisfied from the information currently available that it will show a strong performance versus our overall national target for the year. The picture will, of course, vary from one local authority area to another in terms of what was achieved. Last January, I committed to publishing individual targets for housing delivery in each local authority area in 2018 to enable greater transparency and accountability when it comes to increasing the stock of social housing. The Government has committed over €6 billion, as I said, to Rebuilding Ireland, and it is vital that taxpayer funding is used efficiently and transparently to deliver new homes. Targets for 2018 were published, and in conjunction with delivery information for the fourth quarter of last year, I will shortly publish full-year delivery details by local authority measured against the targets set at the beginning of the year. Following another housing summit later this month, this process will be repeated for 2019. With the policy, resources and funding in place, it is up to the local authorities to ensure delivery, and I'll continue to work with them to ensure the accelerated delivery of much-needed homes for our citizens. Thank you.
1 minute, Deputy.
Minister, can I ask you, do you believe that the targets will be achieved from the information that you have? I know in response to a previous question you have indicated that you have some information back. Do you expect that the targets specifically for the building of social housing, as opposed to all of the other delivery methods that you talk about, if those building targets will be achieved both by local authorities and approved housing bodies? That's the first question. And secondly, Minister, you have shown initiative, for example, in St Michael's Estate. You have said just now that you expect there will be a transition, there will be less HAP solutions in the coming year, and that's welcome. So really my question is, will you use the public land that's available to you to make decisions to actually use public land for solutions like cost rental, for increasing the number of social houses that are being built, so that we can move away from the reliance on the private sector that has happened largely because there wasn't the capacity to build social housing. But we should be over that now. We should be at a point where councils can deliver with the support of your department. And will you ensure that there aren't obstacles and delays put in the way to ensure that we actually can deliver the kind of social housing that most people who come to our clinics actually want, a secure council home as opposed to an insecure private sector home?
Can I get the Minister 1 minute?
Thank you, Lascar Corla, and thank you, Deputy, for the follow-up question. Every delivery mechanism that increases the stock of social housing is important, and that's why we have a number of delivery mechanisms. In case one isn't as successful in a given period or in a given year, that we can then make up using other delivery streams. I think that's important to have that kind of redundancy in place. But also, if there's shocks that we haven't yet anticipated that might potentially take one stream of delivery away, we would have others to be reliant on, so we would never be in a situation where there's nothing happening in social housing. What I expect to see is that when you look at the voids, for example, because we did discuss this at the Joint Oireachtas Committee in December, we'll exceed our voids target. Now, we'll still only count the amount in terms of our targets that we had for voids. So even though we're going to do more voids than have been programmed, the commitment was made that we wouldn't count above that ceiling that we have in the target level. I think I also said in the Joint Oireachtas Committee in December that we're probably going to exceed on acquisitions. I mean, I know we will, because I had to allocate extra funding from it towards the end of the year when I got that additional supplementary funding approved at Cabinet to do more acquisitions, Part of the reason for that was because leasing wasn't happening in some areas like we had hoped it would. But what I'll be able to give you when I have the numbers finalised, and I hope to do that, and I will do that before the end of the month, certainly before the Housing Summit, which is scheduled for the end of the month, is give you a breakdown per the targets, per local authority, so you can see which local authorities exceeded and in which areas, and which did less, and then we can have a conversation about why that might have happened.
Deputy. One.
Further ask in response to what you've just said, Minister, what do you intend to do about the councils that aren't reaching their targets? Because that is the nub of the question. If there are targets, then they should be reached. And if the issue is if the problems are in your department as opposed to in the councils, which some of them would argue, then we need to know that. If the problems are with specific councils, then we need to know that as well. But either way, we need to see social houses built, because whatever you may say about acquisitions and leasing and so on, ultimately, what we need to see is more houses built through the public sector, through using public land, because the private sector will deliver a certain amount, but ultimately what you can control is what's built on public land with public money. And so my question really is, will you be open to, for example, increasing the number of sites used for cost rental? Will you be open to extending the number of public, affordable and social houses that will be built on the land that's owned by the state as opposed to the private sector? Because ultimately that is what we have certainly put forward in our proposals, that we have a lot of public land. We should be building social and affordable housing on that public land, as opposed to making it facilitating the private sector in building on that land.
Minister's final response.
Thank you, Lascan Corn, and thank you, Deputy, for the follow-up question. I think you're absolutely right when you talk about what I can control. And that's why I wanted to bring transparency in terms of what local authorities are doing when it comes to social housing delivery. We secure the funding of government, we put in place the policy, we help the local authorities with the resources, but ultimately they deliver. They're the ones responsible for doing that, and we work with them to do that. And by having individual targets per local authority area across the different streams, and then publishing the actual output against that, we can see what they've done. The Housing Summit this time, and we've had a number of them at this stage, will be a little bit different to previous ones. It'll be 2 separate half-days where those who are performing very strongly will be in one meeting and those who aren't performing as strongly in another, because they have different challenges, different needs in terms of what needs to be worked through as to why some aren't doing as well as the others. So it's through mechanisms like that which we can then work with the local authorities to work out some of the kinks that might be still there in certain parts of the country. However, if you look at the Q3 data, it was 80% up on what was done in Q3 of 2017 by local authorities. So they are increasing the actual build number of social housing homes. And I expect them to continue with the great drive that we are seeing in local authorities now throughout 2019, as I expected them to have done at the end of 2018 in the final quarter. And in relation to cost rental, I want this to be a major component of our rental market. You can't put it in place overnight, but at the moment we are working on a project at scale with St Michael's. I met with the EIB again in December to talk about funding for this, and I also met with the LDA in their offices to talk about how I think in some of those key sites which are very close to kind of core city centres, urban centres, how that could be very appropriate for cost rental. So public land for public housing is absolutely at the core of our policies. Thank you.
Final